Hello everyone, welcome back to the channel. Thanks for checking it out if you're new. If you're at all familiar with this channel, you know that I'm a big fan of the Arkham franchise. I've played almost all of the games countless times. However, there was one that I've only ever played one time. You see, while on console there are 4 main games, Asylum, City, Origins, and Night, there was actually a 5th handheld game released for the 3DS and PS Vita. That is, of course, Batman Arkham Origins Blackgate. What a mouthy title. So for those of you that don't know, this game released with Arkham Origins as a tie-in to be able to, it's one of those where it's not actually Arkham Origins, but it says Arkham Origins on the box, and so they can be like, oh look, there's Arkham Origins for the 3DS and the PS Vita. However, the gameplay is pretty different from the traditional franchise, while also keeping some of the charming elements. So I did want to take some time today to talk about it, especially because it seems to be the most forgotten game of the franchise. So to start off with some backstory, right now we are spoiled by having the Nintendo Switch gaming console. This is of course the console that boasts the ability to play on your TV or take it to go with you. And so a lot of big games that we have today you can take on the go with you. On top of that, we also now have the Steam Deck, which opens up even more possibilities of what you can take on the go. But before that, we had the handheld consoles of the 3DS and the PS Vita. These are much more simplified gaming consoles that were, as the name intends, meant to be handheld and taken on the go. You can play it anywhere. And so because of that, obviously you could never run a game like Arkham City or Arkham Knight on the DS. However, most studios developed a secondary game for these handheld consoles. And that's where Batman Arkham Origins Blackgate comes from. So like I said, obviously it's a much more stripped down version. When you look at the gameplay, the game is what is considered a 2.5D. This is where it's essentially a side-scrolling game where you're walking on a 2D plane. However, the background can shift and you can kind of move into the background. Some elements allow you to move along that Z-axis into the third dimension. However, it's not a full 3D game. So for example, the Arkham games are known for their free-flow combat where you bounce from enemy to enemy flawlessly around huge environments. Well, instead here, it's pretty restricted to the, as I said, side-scrolling. You get a little bit of bouncing between enemies, but it ultimately stays pretty 2D. That being said, I do actually think the combat feels pretty alright. I don't know how well I would say stealth works in this approach. For example, the Penguin boss fight in the game is a stealth mission where you have to zipline around the map and grapple in order to avoid enemies' lines of sight while taking enough of them out for the Penguin to finally come out himself, and then you take him down. And I found this to be the most frustrating boss fight. Because the stealth mechanics are so difficult, it's not like the other Arkham games where you can literally run anywhere and get away. In this one, you're stuck on the 2-dimensional side-scroller. So it takes a lot more thought because if an enemy is in front of you on that exit path, there's nowhere to go but forward. I also feel the game is very easy to get lost in. So with this Castlevania-like experience that they went with, you can complete the game at any pace or at any point that you want to. So the game gives you the main objectives of take down these big enemies. However, like I said, you can go anywhere you want. And so because of that, there's no clear objectives or markers. The map is broken up into several main zones. And in those main zones then are your objectives of you have to go hack this to get to Black Mask, and you have to blow up this wall to get to the Joker. It has a natural flow, so to speak, because, for example, you might attempt to go get Black Mask and then realize, oh, I need the door password that's over in the Joker building, and so then you have to backtrack all the way back to go get the password from the Joker building. And that gets a little frustrating, and the map is a mess. The UI for this game is very much so influenced by Arkham Origins, but again, a much further stripped down, simplified version of it. And so the map is truly awful because the map attempts to be almost this 2.5/3D object that you can view in the menu, and it just gets confusing because you're just like, wait, what level was that on? Additionally, like I said, this was a 3DS and PS Vita game. However, in 2014, they did release a deluxe edition of the game that launched on consoles and PC. And ultimately, I did find some weird, clunky mechanics in this port. Like, it's inherent. When you port a game, there's going to be problems. For example, on PC, everybody knows you can scale and change your graphics depending on your monitor size / what your computer can handle. The game defaults to 720p, and if you attempt to scale it up to a larger, 1080p or 4K, the UI gets weird because while the visuals of the game scale up, the UI, at least in my playthrough, maybe it was an error, did not scale up with it. And so ultimately, I feel like part of the deluxe edition, as they boast, is that, it's remastered. It looks better than it did on the 3DS or PS Vita, which obviously it will because it's running on much more powerful hardware. But it still kind of looked like crap for me because the UI was scaling weirdly, and I ultimately just played the entire game in 720p. So I think the gameplay is clunky, but I do think it's fun. Like, when it works in those combat scenarios, or even some of the stealth mechanics that do work, it's fun. This game, because of the limited 2D aspect of it, relies a lot on puzzles. And I think the puzzles are well thought out and are not too terribly difficult. I will admit I did look up some guides at some points because, like I said, no clear objective markers or anything like that. So I did have to look up, okay, where in the world do I find the password to open this door? So that being said, what about the story? The stories of the Arkham games are beloved. Are they all great? No, but they're some of the best Batman content we've gotten in a while. So, Batman Arkham Origins, again being a 3DS / PS Vita game, does not have rendered cutscenes in the game. Again, borrowing from that Castlevania-esque style, the cutscenes are done in still art or motion comics, and I thought it was actually really cool. Like, would I have loved to see fully rendered cutscenes? Obviously. But for what this game is, I do think the cutscenes look really good, like the art is nice. And I think everything's well voice acted. It's all of the classic Arkham voice actors have come back. Roger Craig Smith and Troy Baker both returned from Arkham Origins, while franchise regulars like Nolan North and Gray Delisle return. So this game is set 3 months after Arkham Origins, where we find Batman investigating a mysterious explosion at Blackgate Penitentiary. At the time, Arkham Asylum is still not up and running, and so of course all of Batman's greatest enemies are housed here at Blackgate. During which we also see some new enemies we haven't met before, such as Amanda Waller and Rick Flag. Something I thought was interesting about this story is that, again, with it being only 3 months after Origins, this is Batman's first encounter with some of his most notable enemies. For example, this is the first time he's met Catwoman or Bronze Tiger. However, because it's this limited, smaller game, it kind of doesn't have the time to flesh these moments out like a main game would. So there's no big reactions from Batman. He's kind of just like, oh, who's that cat lady? Or, hi, Bronze Tiger, let's fight. Also, the Solomon Grundy thing is a little weird, only because in Arkham City it's kind of implied that Grundy has always been under the museum. So throughout the game, you go around taking down the Penguin, the Joker, and Black Mask. And during which, each time you take down these enemies, who comes to pick them up but Amanda Waller and Rick Flag? This was obviously meant to be setting up the Suicide Squad, which I'll be talking about in a later video. Because this would of course lead into the first time the Arkham franchise would tackle the Suicide Squad with the animated film Batman Assault on Arkham. This story is how Amanda Waller got her hands on some of those members. It also, while not exactly the follow-up that fans wanted, feels like a follow-up to that cliffhanger and post-credit scene that we get in the base game of Arkham Origins. On top of all the main villains we fight, of course the game ends with Catwoman. The game both starts and ends with a Catwoman fight. and during which we see that Catwoman has set up bombs around the prison, knowing that Batman, of course, has to go defuse them. After which, once he's defeated Catwoman, we find out that Amanda Waller had hired Catwoman to steal Bane for whatever reason. We don't really get a concrete answer for this, but Waller's okay with it, because while she didn't get Bane, she does get Deadshot and Bronze Tiger, whom she'll be using for her squad. Something this game does that the other Arkham games haven't really done, besides maybe if you consider the hidden ending in Arkham Knight if you 100% the game. But this game actually has multiple different endings. They don't change anything, they all technically probably play out in canon. However, you only get to see the one that you've done. I personally only played the game one time because that's all my patience could take at the time with the difficulty of some of the missions. The ending of the game depends on which one of the three bosses, Joker, Penguin, or Black Mask, whichever one you defeated last, that's whose cutscene you see. Which this scene just implies that they escape Blackgate, which they always do. Personally, my favorite one was the Joker one, in which Joker sneaks out by killing a guard and taking his uniform, you know, that classic escape the Joker always does. But so yeah, I thought it was story-wise an interesting little story. It's nothing crazy, like you can watch the cinematics on YouTube they probably only add up to like an hour or so. But I thought they were fun, and it is at least nice that seeing as we never really got that Suicide Squad game from Warner Bros. Montreal that was supposed to be the sequel to Arkham Origins, it's nice that we at least got this as the sort of pseudo-sequel. I'll be curious to see if we see any of this in the upcoming actual Arkham Origins sequel in Batman Arkham Shadow later this month. So, overall, this forgotten Arkham game, is it perfect? No. Far from it. It definitely has flaws seeing as it's a mobile game, but it's not the worst thing I've ever played. I admit, maybe someday I'll come back to it. I think it's really an artifact of the time it existed. Nowadays, you have the ability to run the Arkham trilogy on either the Nintendo Switch or the Steam Deck. However, when this game came out, this was the only way you could take the Arkham franchise with you. And I could have seen myself, if I owned one of those handheld consoles, bringing this with me everywhere. I'd play this over and over again. But as it sits now, I'm glad I checked it out, but I probably won't be returning to Batman Arkham Origins Blackgate. Let me know in the comments below if you've ever played this game or if you even knew it existed. I know it gets totally forgotten whenever anybody talks about the Arkham franchise, especially when considering it a mobile game. Some people question if it's even canon. I don't believe I ran into anything that stops it from being so I consider it canon. I enjoyed it, and I view it as a prequel to that animated Suicide Squad movie. If you liked what you saw here and want to be here when I talk about that movie, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the bell so you know that next one's coming. Thank you for watching, and I'll see y'all in the next one.